2024, Elizabeth McElmurray set out on what was meant to be a meaningful and emotional journey with her mother, a trip not just for leisure, but for remembrance. What started as a hopeful voyage soon turned tragic, leaving her family and fellow passengers stunned and heartbroken. Elizabeth, 48, was a beloved resident of Wakefield, Massachusetts, where she worked as a manager at Circle K. Known for her deep compassion, Elizabeth's love extended not only to her family and friends, but also to animals. Born in Nashua, New Hampshire, she carried a gentle spirit and was known for her nurturing nature. Those close to her spoke of her warmth, empathy, and the way she could find beauty even in life's most challenging moments. On December 15, 2024, Elizabeth and her mother boarded the Sky Princess, a cruise ship departing from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for an 8-day Caribbean voyage. This trip held profound significance for the two women. They were journeying to Jamaica to scatter the ashes of Elizabeth's late stepfather on a beach he had loved. It was meant to be a farewell filled with peace and closure, a way for mother and daughter to honor a man they both cherished. For nearly a week, the trip unfolded as planned. The Sky Princess glided through sparkling Caribbean waters, stopping at picturesque destinations like Cozumel, Ocho Rios, and Georgetown. Elizabeth shared a joyful photo of herself and her mother on their first day aboard, capturing a fleeting moment of excitement and calm before tragedy struck. On December 21st, just one day before the ship's scheduled return to Florida, a devastating event occurred. According to witness accounts and official reports, Elizabeth attempted to go overboard from one of the upper decks, but rather than clearing the ship's structure, she fell roughly 10 stories and landed on a lower lifeboat deck. The fall was witnessed by several nearby passengers who described the moment as horrifying. One person recalled seeing another passenger briefly grasp Elizabeth's arm before losing grip. In the aftermath, ship crew and emergency responders rushed to the scene, administering life-saving efforts. Despite their swift response, Elizabeth succumbed to her injuries. Her death was later confirmed in an announcement over the ship's intercom, leaving the vessel in collective shock and mourning. The Sky Princess's captain addressed the tragedy solemnly, acknowledging the trauma the event had caused. Grief counselors were made available to support affected passengers. Authorities launched an investigation into the circumstances of Elizabeth's fall. Though Princess Cruises confirmed she had attempted to go overboard, they offered few specifics, citing an ongoing inquiry. Elizabeth's mother, crushed by grief, later thanked the crew for their kindness during the ordeal. Her younger siblings paid tribute as well, remembering her as a kind soul with a deep love for both people and animals. Her sister shared a message urging others to cherish life, to speak love often, and to hold close those who matter most. Elizabeth's death was one of several man-overboard incidents reported in 2024, but for those who knew her, it wasn't just another statistic. It was the unbearable loss of a deeply loved daughter, sister, and friend. Her final moments remain surrounded by questions, but her memory lives on in the hearts of those she left behind. In the sweltering Florida heat of August 2010, 30-year-old Ben McDaniel decided to take a dive, literally, into the mysterious waters of Vortex Spring, a place known for its crystal-clear visibility, scenic underwater caves, and a reputation that screams, "Enter at your own risk." Ben, tall and tanned with a curious mind and a bit of a rebellious streak, was no stranger to scuba diving. But here's the kicker. He wasn't certified for cave diving. Still, that didn't stop him from eyeing the locked gate that led to the forbidden deep. Some say it was curiosity, others say it was a daredevil's itch. Whatever it was, Ben was last seen on August 18th, slipping past the gate with 2 tanks of air, not even the right gas mix, and a big helping of misplaced confidence. And then he was gone. No bubbles, no gear, no body. Search teams sent down elite divers, ROVs, and even cadaver dogs. One pro diver swore that if Ben had gone far into the cave, he would have left signs like displaced silt or scraped walls. But there was nothing. It's like he vanished into another dimension. Theories flooded in. Maybe he staged his own disappearance. Maybe there was foul play. Maybe the cave swallowed him whole. Even years later, the mystery remains as deep as the cave itself. The diving community still debates it over beer and speculation, with no conclusion in sight. His parents even offered a reward for his body, but all they got were more questions and a lot of murky conspiracy theories. So now Ben McDaniel is like the Bigfoot of scuba diving. Everyone's got a theory, nobody's got proof. One thing's for sure, Vortex Spring is beautiful, eerie, and absolutely not the place to go poking around locked gates without a certification and a serious respect for the deep. In 2014, a team of 5 experienced Finnish divers set out to complete a bold traverse through Norway's Plura Cave, one of Europe's deepest and most challenging cave systems. Their mission was ambitious: enter the frigid waters of Plura Lake, navigate over 2.5 kilometers of submerged tunnels at depths nearing 130 meters, and emerge on the other side through Steinugelflagge, a dry cave exit. But beneath the icy surface, things went horribly wrong. During the dive, Jari Huotarinen became trapped in a tight passageway, his equipment entangled, leading to panic and ultimately drowning. Hours later, Jari Usamaki encountered the scene, and in a tragic turn, he too lost his life, likely overwhelmed by shock and disorientation. The remaining divers had no choice but to press forward. When they surfaced and reported the incident, Norwegian authorities immediately sealed off the cave, declaring it too dangerous for recovery efforts. But the survivors, friends, and fellow divers of the deceased refused to leave their friends behind. In an act of remarkable courage and defiance, they launched a secret recovery mission days later, risking their lives to retrieve the bodies from over 120 meters deep. That mission was captured in the hauntingly powerful documentary Diving into the Unknown, a film that tells not just a story of tragedy, but of loyalty, friendship, and the perilous beauty of cave diving. The incident sent shockwaves through the diving community, a sobering reminder that even the best-trained divers can be humbled by the unforgiving nature of deep underwater caves. Plura Cave, with its crystal-clear waters and hidden dangers, remains both a siren song and a stark warning to those who dare venture into its depths. It is a place where one mistake can mean the difference between surfacing and not. On May 25, 1979, Chicago's O'Hare International Airport was bustling as usual, with travelers preparing for Memorial Day weekend getaways. Among them were 258 passengers and 13 crew members aboard American Airlines Flight 191, a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 scheduled to fly to Los Angeles. At first glance, it seemed like any other flight, routine, smooth, and perfectly ordinary. But within moments of takeoff, that sense of normalcy shattered into one of the most devastating tragedies in U.S. aviation history. At 3:02 p.m., Flight 191 began its takeoff roll down runway 32R. Just as the aircraft was lifting off, the left engine suddenly separated from the wing, flipping over the top and tearing away part of the wing's leading edge in the process. To the average observer, it looked like the engine had just peeled off and tumbled away, a deeply unsettling sight that was unfortunately only the beginning. The engine loss wasn't just a matter of thrust. It severed critical hydraulic and electrical systems as well. The aircraft, now crippled and unbalanced, rolled sharply to the left just seconds after liftoff, stalled, and crashed in a fiery explosion into a nearby open field and trailer park. All 271 people on board were killed instantly, along with 2 individuals on the ground. It remains the deadliest aviation accident on American soil, and the images of the smoking wreckage left a haunting impression on the nation. The horror wasn't just in the loss of life, it was in the speed at which everything fell apart, and in the eerie fact that the crash was captured on film by a plane spotter who had been watching from a nearby parking lot. The investigation quickly zeroed in on the engine detachment. Initially, suspicions ranged from bird strikes to manufacturing defects, but the truth was more complex and more unsettling. American Airlines had been using a maintenance shortcut, removing the engine and pylon together as a unit using a forklift rather than separately as recommended. This risky method, although it saved time, put immense pressure on the pylon mount, causing tiny cracks that eventually led to catastrophic failure. Essentially, the engine tore itself away because of a shortcut that had gone unnoticed and uncorrected. The Federal Aviation Administration responded by grounding the entire fleet of DC-10S in the U.S., which caused public panic and massive disruptions. McDonnell Douglas, the aircraft's manufacturer, faced intense scrutiny, even though the fault ultimately lay in maintenance procedures rather than the design itself. The crash of Flight 191 became a defining moment in aviation safety, prompting stricter regulations, tighter oversight, and a renewed emphasis on doing things by the book, especially when lives are at stake. Even decades later, Flight 191 is remembered not just for the tragic scale of its loss, but for how it exposed cracks, both literal and metaphorical, in the system. Memorials have been erected near the crash site, and every year, loved ones gather to honor those who lost their lives in a tragedy that could have been prevented. It's It's a painful reminder that in aviation, even the smallest shortcut can have the gravest consequences, and that safety is always written in lives, not just regulations. The day had begun full of promise, excitement, and the anticipation of adventure. What was meant to be an exhilarating surfing session on Western Australia's south coast turned into a heartbreaking tragedy that left everyone who witnessed it deeply shaken. For those watching helplessly, especially Stephen Payne's partner, the horror of what unfolded was something they would never forget. Stephen Payne was a 37-year-old New Zealander who had found a deep love for surfing during his university years in Dunedin, New Zealand. Even after moving to Geelong, Victoria, surfing remained a core part of his life. Beyond the waves, Stephen was a respected sales and marketing director, a committed volunteer firefighter, and an adventurous spirit who thrived on travel and outdoor activities. Those closest to Stephen described him as a gentle giant, tall and strong, but incredibly kind and laid back. His loyalty to his family, friends, and beloved dog Poppy was unwavering. Alongside his partner of 12 years, Stephen had embarked on a 6-month caravan trip across Australia, excited to chase new waves, explore fresh landscapes, and enjoy the freedom of life on the road. However, just 5 weeks into their journey, fate had other plans. On Monday, March 10th, 2025, Stephen and his partner stopped at Wharton Beach, a remote stretch famed for its excellent surf. The conditions were perfect, and Stephen eagerly paddled out about 50 meters from the shore, surrounded by chest-deep water and accompanied by 2 other surfers. What began as an idyllic moment quickly turned to nightmare. Without warning, a massive shark attacked Stephen with brutal force. His screams shattered the peaceful atmosphere, leaving those on shore, including his partner, horrified and powerless to help. In the chaos, there was no chance for rescue. The water soon turned crimson as the attack continued, and within minutes, Stephen was gone. What started as a rescue operation quickly became a grim recovery mission. Authorities rushed to the scene, closed the beach, and launched marine search teams. Despite their efforts, hope of finding Stephen's body vanished rapidly. A bystander flying a drone inadvertently captured the horrifying aftermath. Footage showing vast amounts of blood, the predator still circling, and chilling scenes seen only by investigators. After 3 days of exhaustive searching, Stephen's remains were never recovered. His surfboard was found floating nearby, bearing deep bite marks that investigators used to identify the shark species involved. But while scientific questions persisted, the painful reality was clear. Stephen was lost forever. His partner, family, and friends were left grappling with an unimaginable loss. In the days that followed, heartfelt tributes poured in from those who loved Stephen. His family released a statement praising him as an incredible man who valued his loved ones deeply, embraced nature with respect, and lived life full of passion and kindness. They recalled how, just a week earlier, Stephen had surfed one of the best waves of his life, sharing a magical moment with a dolphin. Even in the face of tragedy, his family emphasized that of retaliation against sharks or calls for culling. His respect for nature remained intact. Stephen's death was the latest in a series of fatal shark attacks along the Esperance coastline, an area that had experienced 3 others over the past 8 years. Each attack reopened old wounds in the local community and reignited debates about shark safety measures and the hidden dangers of Western Australia's waters. Though the ocean soon returned to its calm state and Wharton Beach reopened, the loss lingered like a haunting shadow. What began as a journey of freedom, adventure, and the simple joy of riding waves turned into a stark reminder of nature's untamed power. Stephen Payne, a passionate explorer and loving soul, became one more name on the growing list of those claimed by the wild sea. One cave story that has haunted generations is the tragic tale of Neil Moss, a 20-year-old Oxford student who ventured too deep into Peak Cavern in 1959 and never came back. Bright, adventurous, and eager to explore, Neil saw a narrow, unexplored shaft and thought, "Let's see where it goes." What began as a weekend of exploration turned into one of the most heartbreaking cave rescues in British history. The place he entered, nicknamed the Devil's Arse, is a vast cave system in Derbyshire, UK. Neil descended into a vertical shaft, now known as Moss Rift, using a rope to lower himself into an extremely narrow passage nearly 1,000 feet from the surface. The deeper he went, the tighter the space became until he was hopelessly wedged, unable to move up or down. Panic spread. Volunteers from across the country, cavers, miners, engineers, even the RAF rushed to help. They tried everything, hauling ropes, winches, lubricants, even a stretcher, but the shaft was so narrow that reaching Neil was nearly impossible. One of the bravest attempts came from June Bailey, a young caver who squeezed into the space to comfort him. But the deeper rescuers went, the worse conditions became. Carbon dioxide levels rose dangerously, and many rescuers had to be pulled out before passing out. Neil drifted in and out of consciousness, and after more than 30 hours underground, he stopped responding. He had suffocated. Neil's family requested his body be left where it was to prevent further risk. The shaft was gently filled with rocks and a memorial placed nearby. His story became a turning point for cave rescue in the UK, changing how operations were conducted. Today, Neil Moss remains a chilling symbol of bravery, tragedy, and the unforgiving power of nature. On October 13, 1972, a Fairchild FH-227D carrying 45 people, including a Uruguayan rugby team, their friends and family took off with high spirits and dreams of playing a match in Chile. But somewhere over the Andes, disaster struck. Due to bad weather and a tragic navigation error, the plane crashed violently into the mountains, instantly killing 12 passengers and leaving the rest stranded in a frozen wasteland at 12,000 feet. With no rescue in sight, freezing temperatures, and minimal supplies, the survivors were thrust into a nightmare few could even imagine. They huddled together for warmth inside the broken fuselage, hoping each sunrise would bring helicopters and salvation. But after 10 days, a heartbreaking radio announcement shattered that hope. The search had been called off. Faced with starvation, the survivors made a harrowing decision that would shock the world. They would survive by consuming the bodies of those who had died. It was not a choice made lightly, but one of necessity, driven by the overwhelming instinct to live. As if their ordeal couldn't get worse, an avalanche struck their shelter on the 17th day, burying the wreckage and killing 8 more people. The survivors now faced the Andes not only with grief and guilt, but with dwindling strength and hope. Realizing that waiting any longer meant certain death, 2 of the strongest men, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, set out to do the unthinkable. Crossed the mountains on foot, with almost no gear and suffering from weeks of starvation. They hiked for 10 days across steep, snow-covered terrain, enduring unimaginable hardship. At last, they encountered a Chilean shepherd across a river and managed to get a message across. This moment marked the turning point. Rescue helicopters were dispatched, and on December 23rd, 72 grueling days after the crash, the remaining 16 survivors were airlifted to safety. What the rescuers found was beyond belief: a group of emaciated, frost-bitten souls who had endured one of the most harrowing survival stories ever recorded. The world was stunned as details emerged. While some headlines sensationalized cannibalism, the deeper truth was one of unimaginable human resilience. These young men had faced death daily, and yet they clung to life with a strength that defied the elements and the odds. In time, the survivors shared their story openly, not to glorify suffering, but to speak honestly about courage, unity, and the difficult moral lines drawn in extreme situations. Books like Alive by Piers Paul Read and documentaries such as Stranded and Society of the Snow have told their story with the depth and emotion it deserves. For many of the survivors, the Andes crash was not just a tragic memory, but a turning point that defined the rest of their lives. It remains one of the most powerful examples of human survival, not just of the body, but of the spirit. The story of Flight 571 is a haunting reminder that sometimes, even in the most unforgiving corners of the world, the will to live can push us beyond what we ever believed possible. On the afternoon of August 26, 2024, what began as an exciting adventure for a group of tourists in Iceland turned into a tragic and unforgettable catastrophe. A guided ice cave tour beneath the famed Breidammerkurjökull glacier, a highlight for many visiting the country, ended with the death of an American tourist and a renewed focus on the dangers of glacier exploration. The unnamed man was visiting Iceland with his girlfriend. Both were American citizens, drawn like thousands of others to the country's spectacular natural landscapes, especially its seasonal ice caves. These formations, carved by meltwater flowing beneath glaciers, are known for their otherworldly beauty, walls of shimmering blue ice sculpted over centuries. Access to these caves is tightly regulated and typically limited to guided tours led by trained professionals who monitor conditions and prioritize safety. That Sunday, the couple joined a group of 21 tourists from various countries for one such tour. Their guide led them deep into the glacier to explore the awe-inspiring caverns. But even the most experienced guides can't eliminate the risks that come with exploring these constantly shifting environments. At approximately 3 p.m. local time, as the group gathered in a ravine between cave sections, a section of ice suddenly collapsed without warning. Massive chunks of ice fell from the walls, crashing down onto the group below. Panic erupted. Screams echoed through the cave as tourists scrambled to escape. In the chaos, several people were buried, including the American couple. Tour guides immediately called for emergency assistance, triggering a large-scale rescue operation that mobilized over 200 responders. The site's remoteness and treacherous terrain posed serious challenges. Rescue teams couldn't bring in heavy equipment and were forced to dig by hand using chainsaws and shovels. With the risk of further collapses looming, time was critical. After hours of relentless work, the teams found the American couple. The man had sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. His girlfriend, though injured, was alive and was airlifted to a hospital in Reykjavik. Her current condition has not been publicly disclosed. Initial confusion arose over whether 2 additional tourists were missing. But upon reviewing the tour company's manifest, officials confirmed only 23 people had participated, not 25 as originally believed. Despite this, rescuers continued to clear all remaining ice to ensure no one else was trapped. The incident sparked immediate questions about the safety protocols governing glacier tours. The Association of Icelandic Mountain Guides called for an in-depth investigation and potential regulatory changes. Although tours are typically run by experts, glacial environments are inherently unpredictable. Authorities emphasized that there were no visible warning signs of instability at the time of the collapse. The tragedy also highlights a growing concern among scientists. As climate change accelerates glacial melting, the structural integrity of ice caves is becoming more volatile. This reality could make such collapses more frequent and harder to predict. The U.S. State Department confirmed the man's death and extended condolences to his family, offering consular support to his injured partner. Icelandic officials are now preparing a report to assess what went wrong and how future accidents might be prevented. What began as a day of awe and exploration ended in heartbreak, a powerful reminder of nature's unpredictable and sometimes. In the summer of 1974, beneath the hills of South Wales, Roger Solari entered Ogof Agen Alwed, a sprawling cave system with a name straight out of fantasy. But instead of treasures, this story came with cold water, darkness, and one of Britain's most haunting cave diving disappearances. Roger, part of a team of skilled explorers, was diving the terminal sumps, tight, water-filled tunnels for only the boldest divers. He and Martin Farr reached the 4th sump, a notoriously difficult section. Martin turned back after assessing the conditions. Roger went on alone and was never seen again. Panic swept the caving world. Rescue efforts began immediately. Dozens of divers plunged into the cave's depths, but all they found was silence. No body, no gear, not even a flipper. Weeks passed and the mystery only deepened. Years later, Martin Farr, now a legendary cave diver, returned to the sump and claimed he saw what might be Roger's remains lodged in a dangerous, unreachable section. The cave was too perilous for retrieval. In time, part of the cave was named the Remembrance Series in Roger's honor. His story lingered not just for its tragedy, but for the unsettling absence of closure. Unlike most cave diving accidents, Roger's disappearance offered no finality. He vanished like smoke into stone. Roger Solari's name is now whispered in dive briefings and echoed in documentaries. His story is a solemn reminder that even the most skilled explorers are at nature's mercy. Caves are beautiful but merciless. Roger didn't just dive into the unknown, he became part of it. Forever entombed in the place he loved, his legacy lives on in the limestone silence of Agen Alved, a legend buried deep beneath the surface, honored with awe and remembered with quiet respect. In 1984, Slovak mountaineer Jozef Sotka set out to do something few had ever dared: to reach the summit of Mount Everest without supplemental oxygen. At the age of 50, he was not only challenging the physical extremes of the world's highest peak, but also the biological limits of human endurance. Alongside him were fellow climber Zoltan Demjan and the experienced Ang Rita Sherpa, a mountaineering legend in his own right. Their approach was bold and minimalist. No oxygen tanks, no frills, just skill, resilience, and trust in one another. After a grueling climb through Everest's treacherous southeast ridge, navigating the infamous Khumbu icefall and weather that could change in minutes, the trio reached the summit on October 15, 1984. For Sotka, it was the realization of a lifelong dream, and his success made him one of the oldest climbers at the time to reach the top without artificial oxygen. But Everest has a way of reminding climbers that the summit is only half the journey. On the descent, things took a tragic turn. Sotka became separated from his teammates, likely due to exhaustion, altitude sickness, or shifting conditions, somewhere near the dangerous Kangshung face. He fell, possibly slipping or succumbing to the effects of extreme altitude. His body was later found far below, a stark and heartbreaking reminder of the mountain's unforgiving nature. Though his life ended on Everest, Josef Sotka's legacy lives on. His courage, determination, and pioneering spirit continue to inspire climbers around the world. In Slovakia, he is honored not just as a mountaineer, but as a symbol of human endurance and the price sometimes paid in pursuit of greatness. On the morning of August 14, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 took off from Larnaca, Cyprus, bound for Athens, Greece, with 121 people on board, a mix of vacationers, families, and crew looking forward to an ordinary day. But what followed was anything but ordinary. Shortly after takeoff, a small but deadly error began to unfold. The aircraft's pressurization system, which should have been set to automatic, had mistakenly been left on manual after a routine maintenance check. This meant that as the plane climbed higher, the cabin failed to properly pressurize. Within minutes, the air inside the aircraft grew dangerously thin. Alarms started sounding in the cockpit, but tragically, the crew misinterpreted them. The warning horn that blared, meant to indicate cabin pressure problems, was identical to the one for takeoff configuration errors. In the chaos and confusion, the pilots didn't realize they were slowly succumbing to hypoxia, a silent and creeping condition where the brain and body are starved of oxygen. As they lost consciousness, so did the rest of the people on board, one by one, until the plane was flying completely unresponsive on autopilot, a ghost in the sky. For the next 2 hours, the aircraft silently cruised over Greek airspace, completely out of contact. Greek fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the wayward 737, and what they saw was chilling. The cockpit windows were frosted over. The captain appeared slumped at the controls. Oxygen masks were hanging down inside the cabin, but no one was moving. It was clear to everyone watching from the ground and the sky that something had gone terribly wrong, but in a surprising twist, movement was suddenly spotted. Someone was alive. A flight attendant named Andreas Prodromou, one of the few people who had managed to put on an oxygen mask in time, had regained partial consciousness. Trained as a flight attendant and with some pilot experience, he made a heroic effort to save the aircraft. He fought his way to the cockpit, past unconscious passengers and low oxygen levels, and tried to take control. For a brief moment, the plane showed signs of manual input, a last-ditch effort to steer the doomed flight, but sadly, it was too late. With fuel nearly exhausted, the engines flamed out and the aircraft began to descend uncontrollably. At 12:04 p.m., it crashed into the hills near Grammatico, Greece, killing all on board. The investigation that followed uncovered a chain of small but fatal oversights: the switch in the wrong setting, the failure to recognize the hypoxia symptoms, and the confusion caused by identical warning sounds. Helios Airways and its procedures came under intense scrutiny, as did the design of the aircraft's alert systems. One of the most debated issues was how such a preventable technical oversight, a simple switch, could lead to a full-scale aviation disaster. The incident exposed how fragile safety can be when training gaps, mechanical oversight, and human error line up perfectly in the wrong way. In the aftermath, Boeing made changes to cockpit warning systems, and airlines worldwide reviewed pressurization training. But the tragedy of Flight 522 remains a haunting reminder of how silence in the skies can signal something far more sinister. A plane full of people, drifting on autopilot, unconscious and unreachable. It wasn't just a crash. It was a slow, quiet unraveling of life at 34000 feet. And the image of fighter pilots helplessly watching from the outside, unable to intervene, only adds to the heartbreak. Sometimes the scariest thing in aviation isn't the noise, it's the silence. What was meant to be one of the most joyful times in Sarah Kusak's life, pregnancy and the countdown to her wedding, was suddenly and tragically cut short. A senseless act of violence turned her future into a nightmare, leaving behind grief, shock, and countless unanswered questions. In February 2009, 36-year-old Sarah Kusk from Savannah, Georgia, was eagerly anticipating the birth of her first child. She had spent years working as a chef aboard luxury yachts captained by her fiancé, Cheshire McIntosh. The two shared a deep bond, strengthened by their shared love of the ocean and a life at sea. Their wedding was scheduled for March, and they planned to continue sailing through the Caribbean after the baby's birth in May. Their love story had begun years earlier in Fiji, where Sarah was vacationing and Cheshire was employed at a sailing resort. Their connection was instant, and over time it blossomed into a serious relationship. By early 2009, they had anchored in Puerto Rico, preparing to set sail for the British Virgin Islands. On the morning of February 4th, Sarah went for a jog near the Saba Marina in Puerto Rico. Staying active had always been important to her, even during pregnancy, although she had recently scaled back her workouts. She asked a marina staff member for a good 5-mile route, but somewhere along the way she got lost and ended up on an isolated rural road. It was there that she encountered Eleazar Marquez Nadeau, a 36-year-old local man with a history of violence. He noticed Sarah jogging alone and, with chilling intent, prepared an ambush, parking his car with the trunk open. As she ran past, he attacked, forcing her into the trunk and slamming it shut before speeding away. Realizing she had been abducted, Sarah managed to call a marina employee from the trunk, desperately pleading for help and giving details of her kidnapping. She also reached out to her fiancé, Cheshire, telling him she didn't think she would survive. Though always a fighter, in that terrifying moment, she sensed the outcome was inevitable. Authorities immediately began tracing her phone signal in a desperate attempt to find her in time. Tragically, less than an hour after her final call, Sarah's body was discovered in a field. Her throat had been slashed and her life, along with the life of her unborn son, was cruelly taken. Soon after, police apprehended Marquez in his car, which was splattered with blood. Sarah's phone, along with rope and strands of hair, were found inside. Though he initially offered a bizarre excuse, claiming the blood came from an injured horse, he later confessed to the crime. The murder sent shockwaves through the community and devastated everyone who knew Sarah. The case took an even darker turn when investigators learned that Marquez's mother had been convicted in 1992 for murdering 2 children in a similarly brutal manner. Marquez himself had been tried for homicide in 1995, but was acquitted. The revelations led to public outcry over how someone with such a violent background was free to commit yet another atrocity. During court proceedings, Marquez remained emotionless. Prosecutors pursued the maximum penalty, refusing any plea deals. In May, he pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 105 years in prison. Still, for Sarah's loved ones, no sentence could erase the pain of their loss. Cheshire, overwhelmed by grief, requested privacy to mourn. Back in Savannah, their home stood ready for a child who would never arrive. Though Sarah's life ended in terror, her memory endures. As a woman who loved deeply, lived fully, and fought bravely until the end. Eric Establie wasn't just any cave diver. He was one of France's most respected underwater explorers, a seasoned hydrologist with years of experience navigating Europe's most treacherous submerged cave systems. On September 3, 2010, he entered the Dragonnière de God cave in southern France as part of a research dive studying the Ardèche region's water network. This cave wasn't for amateurs. Narrow, flooded, and extremely complex, it demanded absolute precision. For Eric, it was familiar territory, but something went terribly wrong. When he didn't return, a massive rescue operation began. The cave's tight passages and murky waters posed extreme challenges. French rescue teams soon called in 2 elite British divers, Rick Stanton and John Valanthan, already legends in cave diving and later known for rescuing the Thai soccer team in 2018. Hopes rested on the possibility that Eric had found an air pocket beyond a collapse. Rescuers braved near-zero visibility and dangerous conditions, inching through the submerged maze. On September 11th, after days of tense searching, divers found Eric's body roughly 980 meters from the entrance, at a depth of 60 meters. Signs suggested he had indeed survived for a time in a small air pocket and had even attempted to find a way out. His death devastated not just the rescue team, but the entire global cave diving community. Eric wasn't just a diver. He was a passionate scientist, a father, and a respected figure in exploration. His passing reignited conversations about the inherent risks of cave diving even for the best. It also underscored the courage of rescuers who risk everything in these unforgiving environments. Though the Dragonnière de God claimed one of the finest, Eric's legacy endures in the maps he helped create, the lives he inspired, and the safety reforms his loss prompted. On July 17, 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 took off from Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, bound for Kuala Lumpur. It was supposed to be a routine, long-haul flight over Europe and Asia, a quiet 12 hours in the sky, with movies, meals, and mild turbulence. But somewhere over eastern Ukraine, cruising at 33,000 feet, everything changed in an instant. The plane vanished from radar, and before anyone could even grasp what had happened, debris was raining down over fields and villages near Hrabov, in a war-torn region embroiled in a bitter conflict between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists. All 298 people on board, passengers and crew, were killed. No distress call, no warning, just silence and smoke. What followed was a global outcry, a political mess, and one of the most intense international investigations the aviation world had ever seen. Almost immediately, suspicion pointed toward a surface-to-air missile, a Russian-made Buk system. It didn't take long before intelligence agencies, satellite images, and social media posts painted a picture. A missile launcher had been moved across the Russian border into separatist-held territory that day, and later returned, suspiciously, one missile short. The Dutch-led joint investigation team took the lead, combing through wreckage, tracking military hardware, analyzing flight paths, and even studying intercepted phone calls. What they found was damning. The missile was fired from an area controlled by pro-Russian fighters, using equipment traced back to a Russian military unit. It wasn't just an accident, it was a catastrophic mistake with geopolitical consequences. The passengers on board came from all over the world: the Netherlands, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, the UK, Germany, and several other countries. Among them were families, students, tourists, and researchers. There was even a large group of AIDS researchers heading to an international conference. Their loss was felt not just in their home countries, but globally. Grief turned into outrage. Governments demanded accountability. Russia, for its part, denied involvement, dismissed the investigation as biased, and pushed alternate theories, none of which held up under scrutiny. Meanwhile, images of teddy bears scattered in sunflower fields and the charred remains of the aircraft circulated widely, symbolizing the horror of war spilling into civilian life. In 2022, a Dutch court finally handed down its verdict. 3 men, 2 Russian nationals, and a Ukrainian separatist were convicted in absentia of murder and causing the crash. They were linked directly to the missile launcher and its deployment. The verdict didn't bring back the victims, but it offered some closure to the families. It also sent a message that even in the fog of war, justice might still find a way. More recently, in 2025, the International Civil Aviation Organization concluded that Russia violated international aviation law, further solidifying global consensus on the state's indirect responsibility. Separately, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Russia bore legal responsibility for the attack, adding yet another layer of international condemnation. What makes the MH17 tragedy stand out isn't just the scale of the loss or the political tension it stirred up, it's how clearly it showed the danger of modern conflicts overlapping with global air travel. It was a harsh reminder that war zones and commercial flight paths don't mix. Airliners full of innocent civilians don't belong in anyone's crosshairs, and yet on that day in July, one did. The legacy of MH17 is still unfolding in courtrooms and diplomatic halls, but its human cost is eternal. Families were torn apart, lives were cut short, and a routine flight turned into a tragedy that circled the globe. There was no time to react, no second chance. Just one missile, one moment, and a sky that should have been safe, but wasn't. Uranus Vanagus Peña was on what should have been a relaxing, joyful family vacation in the tranquil waters of Helios Cay, a scenic spot just off the Colombian island of San Andrés. The Caribbean sun sparkled on the gentle waves as she swam, blissfully unaware that a peaceful day in the ocean was about to turn into an unthinkable tragedy. Just 24 years old, Uranus was a college student from Cajica, a city in central Colombia. Known for her intelligence, warmth, and adventurous nature, she had a bright future ahead of her. This trip to San Andrés was meant to be a short break from her studies, a chance to spend quality time with her family and recharge in one of the country's most beloved coastal destinations. On the afternoon of September 8, 2023, Uranus and her family were enjoying the shallow, crystal-clear waters of Helios Cay. The beach was popular among tourists for its natural beauty and calm environment, making it a favorite for swimmers. As she floated through the water, she had no reason to suspect that danger was fast approaching. Suddenly, a small motorboat sped into the area. Its captain, unaware that swimmers were in his path, didn't see Uranus in time. In a split second, the boat struck her. The sharp propeller blades tore through her body, severing her arm and leg. The water turned red around her as she struggled, and panic spread among the nearby swimmers. Some screamed, others froze in place, overwhelmed by the horror of what they had just witnessed. The boat's captain, realizing the gravity of what had happened, stopped immediately and rushed to pull Uranus from the water. He transported her as quickly as possible to Clarence Lind Newball Memorial Hospital, the island's main medical center, but the injuries were far too severe. She had lost too much blood, and by too late, Uranus had died from her wounds. The accident sent shockwaves across the island and the country. The loss of such a vibrant young life, on a vacation meant for joy and connection, was heartbreaking. The boat operator voluntarily turned himself in, cooperating fully with authorities as an investigation was launched into the incident. In the wake of the tragedy, the governor of San Andres, Ever Hawkins, publicly expressed his condolences and emphasized the need for immediate reforms. He acknowledged that while the island thrives on tourism, safety measures had not kept pace with the growing number of visitors. He proposed new restrictions on boating in designated swimming zones and called on lawmakers to act swiftly to protect both locals and tourists from similar accidents in the future. This was not the first such tragedy on the island, and for many, it highlighted a systemic failure to enforce marine safety protocols. Uranus's death became a painful reminder of the urgent need for change. As her family prepared for her funeral, they were left to mourn a daughter and sister whose life was full of promise. What began as a joyful vacation ended in heartbreak, leaving behind grief, calls for accountability, and a haunting lesson about the cost of neglecting basic safety. Jacob's Well in Texas, with its crystal-clear waters and peaceful surface, hides one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in the U.S. In 1983, that deceptive beauty claimed the life of 22-year-old Richard Patton. On November 23rd, Patton and his diving partner, both experienced and well-equipped, entered the submerged passages of Jacob's Well, a place that had already taken multiple lives. Though once sealed with a metal grate due to previous deaths, the cave had been reopened, tempting divers into its deadly depths. The pair descended about 90 feet before squeezing into a tight tunnel, removing their tanks and sharing a single regulator, a risky move with zero margin for error. Inside the maze-like cave, one tank got stuck. With air running low and orientation lost, the divers attempted to retreat but mistakenly entered a blind chimney, a vertical shaft that led nowhere. Patton's partner managed to escape, but Patton remained trapped and drowned. His body was found the next morning in that very shaft, a grim reminder of how unforgiving cave diving can be. Patton's death wasn't just another statistic. It highlighted how even trained divers can be undone by nature's complexity. Cave diving demands more than skill and gear. It requires razor-sharp spatial awareness, calm under pressure, and a strong sense of when to turn back. Jacob's Well had already claimed 9 lives by the mid-1980s, including Patton's, due to its sudden drop-offs and disorienting verticals. Today, Jacob's Well remains popular above ground, but its underwater cave is a somber, cautionary tale in the diving world. Richard Patton's story is often used in training as a powerful example of the risks in overhead environments, where one wrong turn can mean no way back. The lesson is clear: even serene waters can hide deadly traps. On December 21st, 1988, just days before Christmas, Pan Am Flight 103 was cruising peacefully at 31,000 feet, carrying 259 people across the Atlantic from London to New York. It was a routine transatlantic journey, the kind thousands make each day, with passengers thinking about holiday reunions, business meetings, or just getting home. But that peace shattered in an instant. Without warning, the plane exploded over the quiet Scottish town of Lockerbie, sending wreckage raining down across 845 square miles of countryside. The explosion tore the Boeing 747 apart mid-air, one of the most chilling acts of aviation terrorism the world had ever seen. All 259 people on board were killed instantly, and as the fiery debris slammed into the homes and streets below, 11 Lockerbie residents also lost their lives in a moment that turned their small town into the center of an international catastrophe. The blast was traced to a suitcase bomb hidden inside a tape recorder packed with Semtex plastic explosives, which had been checked onto the plane in Malta, transferred through Frankfurt, and finally loaded onto Flight 103 in London. The attack wasn't just devastating, it was deliberate. After a massive investigation involving the FBI, Scottish authorities, and countless international experts, the blame eventually landed on two Libyan intelligence agents, Abdelbasset al-Megrahi and Lamine Khalifa Fhimah. Years of political wrangling followed before al-Megrahi was finally convicted in 2001 in a special Scottish court in the Netherlands. Libya's then leader Muammar Gaddafi initially denied involvement, but in 2003 his government accepted responsibility for the bombing, paid compensation to the victims' families, and started clawing its way out of global isolation. But even then, many questions lingered. Was al-Megrahi really guilty? Was there more to the story? Numerous conspiracy theories have swirled around Lockerbie ever since, ranging from CIA cover-ups to botched drug stings to claims of planted evidence. In 2020, the U.S. charged a third man, Abu Aguila Masood, believed to have built the bomb. He was eventually extradited and faces trial, showing how, decades later, the wheels of justice are still slowly grinding on. Beyond the politics and legal twists, the human impact of Lockerbie has been immense. Many of the victims were American college students returning home for the holidays, including 35 students from Syracuse University. The university has since built a major memorial and scholarship program in their honor, keeping their stories alive. In Lockerbie itself, grief turned into resilience. And over the years, the town has embraced the victims' families as their own, building friendships, holding vigils, and tending memorials that dot the landscape. And yet, even today, Lockerbie remains a byword for tragedy, reminding the world how a single act of terror can send shockwaves across continents. The crash site has been visited by thousands, from political leaders to grieving relatives, all trying to understand how something so violent could happen in such a peaceful place. While aviation security has come a long way since 1988, thanks in part to the hard lessons learned from Lockerbie, the incident still feels painfully relevant, especially in a world where air travel remains a soft target for those who seek to make a statement through destruction. The legacy of Pan Am Flight 103 is one of heartbreak, yes, but also of tenacity, remembrance, and the quiet strength of communities that refuse to let terror define them. Decades have passed, but the echoes of that December evening still linger in the Scottish skies and in the hearts of those who will never forget.